everyone, I'm John with Roadkill Incorporated. Did you hear the news? The Oregon Right to Repair bill banned parts pairing. Or that's what the media is reporting at least. But is that actually true? And what does this win really mean? What is parts pairing anyway? And how does this legislation affect how it's going to work in the future? Why aren't we hearing those details? Today I'm going to drill down into the Oregon bill and see what it says and try to answer the question, did the Oregon Right to Repair bill actually succeed in banning parts pairing? I'll give you a hint, it's not exactly the news you're hoping for or nearly as straightforward as you'd like it to be. Many manufacturers use parts pairing, but Apple is the bellwether that matters most. Parts pairing is a relatively new and insidious technology that cryptographically or otherwise ties component parts of devices together. You swap a battery in an iPhone, the new one doesn't match, and you get a warning that the replacement is not an authentic battery. You swap screens on two brand new MacBooks, as shown brilliantly by Hugh Jeffries in this video, and you lose the True Tone feature on both of them and effectively have two bad laptops. To resolve this, you must contact Apple, which has centralized control of all its devices, and if they decide you and your parts are qualified, they wave their magic wand, and over the network they pair the part and it works again. For the most part, this happens over a chat session. And the kicker is, they don't pair any parts except parts you have bought new from them. So no used parts. That's right, all used Apple parts in the world are trash. And because the entire secondary market is composed of low-value devices that can't justify purchase of a new part, they are also trash. Parts pairing therefore gives Apple an absolute monopoly on the Apple repair industry. Apple devices in their very architecture are now designed wounded and entirely dependent upon Apple's centralized control to pair parts that have been swapped. While we're defining terms, what is right to repair exactly? The phrase right to repair is used in two different ways. It's used very generally in the sense of, hey, we all deserve a right to repair our stuff. But separate from that is the Right to Repair organization, repair.org, and many other groups which are involved in trying to pass very specific legislation. It has a few targeted goals that it's trying to encode into law. The core of the Right to Repair agenda is fairly straightforward. Require manufacturers to give owners and repair shops the same tools, documentation, and OEM parts that they give their own authorized dealers, and at reasonable prices. And more recently, anti-parts pairing language has been added to the agenda as well. And I believe that's because with parts pairing in place, and Apple therefore having a repair monopoly, other right to repair objectives simply don't matter as much. It just doesn't matter that Apple will sell you proprietary tools if the secondary market is dead and the parts you want to install can't be paired. Right to repair is going for something called the Brussels effect. That is the idea that if a region, such as the EU, mandates a change from manufacturers, it's easier for manufacturers to implement that change universally than have different policies for different parts of the world. This is why there are right to repair bills being passed in many states. The bills get mangled by special interests as they move through the process, and some leave important elements out, but the hope is that the sum total of passed language across all of them constitutes the entirety of right to repair objectives, and manufacturers will then have to create a single policy encompassing everything. Okay, before we get to the Oregon bill, first let's look at the Right to Repair template on repair.org. Right to Repair has a legislative template document which they offer as ideal wording for the state bills to copy. It's useful to look at this template because, first, you have an undiluted view of what Right to Repair is about and what it ideally wants, and second, you can compare it to the actual bills and see where it's been watered down and changed. So here we go. An act to promote equipment owner choice and competition by requiring manufacturers of digital electronic equipment to make available to owners and independent repair providers on fair and reasonable terms the documentation, parts, and tools used to diagnose, maintain, and repair such equipment. So that's basically the whole thing condensed into a summary. My biggest gripe with Right to Repair has always been that it defines everything in terms of owners and independent repair providers. People will argue with me on this, but Right to Repair is really meant to help the first owner of a device and the repair shop that repairs for that first owner. This is the framing of its language, which I think is problematic because it leaves other entities out that don't fit the framing. More on that later, though. So next is the parts pairing section. Prevent the installation or functioning of any otherwise functional part, including a non-manufacturer approved replacement part or component. So, presumably, this is saying a manufacturer can't prevent you from utilizing used parts or OEM parts that you didn't buy from Apple. I don't know why it doesn't just say used specifically, but non manufacturer approved must mean that, I would think. Next, inhibit or reduce the functioning of any part such that replacement by an independent repair provider or the device owner would cause the device to operate with reduced functionality or performance. Now, I think this is probably speaking to things like the lack of true tone issue with swapping the screens. Next, create false, misleading, deceptive, or undismissible alerts or warnings about parts. This probably refers to things like battery alert messages. The intent here is good, but I think the wording is a problem. Apple is not going to agree that their alerts are false, misleading, or deceptive. I'm sure they believe their alerts are true, instructive, and informative. I think it will take lawsuits, honestly, to prove any given alert falls under these categories. Undismissible is good to say, because that undeniably describes a category of alerts, but the other words, I don't know. Then we talk about the need for the repair provider to be let into a device for purpose of repair. Then we define authorized repair provider, digital electronic equipment, documentation, embedded software. This is all good and straightforward. Fair and reasonable terms, which means manufacturers need to provide everything on the same level as what they give to their authorized people. And then fair and reasonable terms with respect to tools made available by the OEM, and this is important, without requiring authorization or internet access for the use or operation of such tools or imposing impediments to access or use of the tools to diagnose, maintain, or repair and enable full functionality of digital electronic equipment. Okay, so this is potentially great. If I'm reading this right, it says the provided tools to pair parts cannot require authorization or internet access for the use of such tools. This is huge. Currently, when someone swaps a part and needs it paired, it's necessary to contact Apple by internet or text, and they do the pairing over the network. So, what does this mean? Does it mean Apple would have to provide an offline piece of software to do pairing because the internet is not an option? Would they have to give up their centralized control and effectively hand the owners the key to the lock? That, or possibly even remove parts pairing infrastructure from their devices entirely? It looks that way. Next, not in a manner that impairs the efficient and cost-effective performance of any such diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. This just means that the use of the tool can't constitute an impractical burden. For example, as a refurbisher who might get 1,000 devices, I would say that the mere existence of the tool and the need to use it on all the devices is a burden that could potentially require dozens of hours to be wasted on a nonsensical procedure. But hey, as a refurbisher, I'm probably not eligible to use the tool anyway. Okay, so now on to the definition of independent repair provider. Independent repair provider means an individual or business, remember that, operating in this state that does not have an arrangement described in paragraph A of this subdivision with an original equipment manufacturer and who is engaged in the services of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of digital electronic equipment. All right, so engaged in the services of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of equipment. To continue my previous diatribe, consider that recyclers and refurbishers are not engaged in the service of providing repair. We do fix stuff, but we don't fix it for people. We fix the stuff and then sell it. This is a problem. This is one way we don't fit neatly into the definitions of owner or independent repair provider. So basically, the whole secondary market and a refurbisher like me is at risk of not getting any right to repair benefit at all because Apple can say we're outside the definitions of owner or repair provider. Yes, it says an owner can be a business, but clearly the context of the language is owner and repair shop, not refurbisher being an owner. Believe me, as someone who has spent 100 hours over 15 years talking to Apple and trying to get them to do stuff, they have no problem saying that as a business I don't qualify for their services. What's the answer to this? Just get rid of the owner and repair provider language entirely and use the word people. We, the people, deserve the right to repair. Make it simple. If you delineate groups of people, then you're inviting them to be treated very differently, as we'll see later. Okay, more definitions. On to the definition of part, which says it can be new or used, which is great. And next, on to the definition of tool. Tool means any software program, hardware implement, or other apparatus used for diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of digital electronic equipment, including software or other mechanisms that provision, program, or pair a new part. Wait, this is weird. A tool that pairs parts is only for pairing new parts? What the heck is that? Why would you say a tool for parts pairing specifically pairs a new part? Is that an accident? Did they mean to leave out used parts? This changes everything. We saw above that parts can be new or used, but when talking about tools, we're only talking about tools that pair new parts? So, back way up. Previously, we saw that Apple can't prevent functioning of a swapped out third party or OEM part, and Apple can't require internet access for the operation of parts pairing tools, but now tool is different than we assumed. Tool is now defined as something that pairs new parts. So the tool for pairing new parts can't be internet based, but does that mean the tool for pairing used parts can be internet based? Is there even a tool for pairing used parts? I'm so confused. I just don't get this, and I hope there's some underlying logic here that I'm just too dumb to understand. But I don't know. It seems to me like this text has errors. Why would it be contradictory in this way, and in the suggested template, no less? I just don't get it. But anyway, that's the template. To stay positive, if I'm reading it correctly, it has some pretty strong anti-parts pairing language in there, and it suggests that repair.org itself does want to do away with parts pairing's centrally controlled infrastructure, and the mechanism to make that happen is to disallow the need for internet access. Okay, let's move on to the Oregon bill. And by the way, it's pronounced Oregon, not Oregon. I grew up there, so I know. But anyway, the template we just looked at is not active legislation, but Oregon passed, so Oregon is the real deal. This is the bill that so many are saying bans parts pairing. So let's see if it does. So it starts with the definition of authorized service provider. They choose to use the word person rather than owner or business, which is interesting, but they still separate owner from independent repair provider, so it doesn't really matter. Some definitions next. Okay, definition of independent repair provider. Weird that if you're authorized, you're an authorized service provider, but if you're independent, you're an independent repair provider. That seems odd. The independent repair provider engages in the business of diagnosing, maintaining, repairing, or updating. This is actually a little more inclusive than the template. It's more inclusive to say in the business than in the service, because refurbishers and recyclers are not in the service of repair, but we are in the business, you could say. Next, what the hell is this? Independent repair providers must possess a valid and unexpired certification that demonstrates that the person has the technical capabilities and competence necessary to safely, securely, and reliably repair consumer electronics equipment in accordance with widely accepted standards, such as wireless industry service excellence, blah, 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 or another certification that an original equipment manufacturer accepts as evidence that the person can perform safe, secure, and reliable repairs? What the hell? This is unbelievable. The independent repair provider must get certified, and a certification that the manufacturer determines is acceptable? This is total crap. No right to repair benefits unless you're certified. The real kicker is that the OEM has to accept the certification. I can't believe that. Rest assured, Apple's going to come up with its own certification, and only that certification will be acceptable to Apple, and they will certainly give you a whole array of hoops to jump through to get it, too. They'll probably make you sign an NDA as well, as they do for so many of their programs, and then you'll be silent and unable to advocate for yourself. This is just absurd on so many levels. What a massive concession to make. A repair company has to be certified to the satisfaction of the manufacturer. Did you read about that anywhere in the congratulatory articles about the Oregon bill? I swear, did anyone read the bill at all before they declared victory, before they wrote and published articles? Wow, I'm just floored by that. But moving on, owner looks okay. Part is new or used, like the template. No mention of third-party parts. Disappointing again. Okay, so hold your breath. Here's the definition of tool. What does Oregon have to say about tools? Well, unfortunately, Oregon maintains the same language as the template, and parts pairing tools in Oregon are also only for pairing new parts. So they just copied the language. Next is an interesting paragraph. An original equipment manufacturer shall make available to an owner or an independent repair provider on fair and reasonable terms any documentation, tool, part, or other device or implement that the original equipment manufacturer makes available to an authorized service provider for the purpose of diagnosing, maintaining, repairing, or updating consumer electronic equipment. So diagnosing, maintaining, repairing, or updating, but curiously, not pairing. And even if it did mention pairing, I don't think authorized service providers have parts pairing tools. I think they just contact Apple to pair parts like everyone else, as far as I've been told. But then again, we don't really know because Apple related entities are under NDAs, so who knows? But that's not the parts pairing section. Here's the parts pairing section. It has the same language, the same mention that parts pairing can't be used to prohibit unapproved parts, which again, we have to assume means used or OEM that they didn't sell you. So this has the same contradictory new versus used situation as the template. Clearly, they just copied the wording. Then the same language about alerts, which, as I said, I think is a mess, but if it can succeed, great. So next is section 2, and this is really crazy. I'm not going into it word for word, but it basically says an independent repair provider must inform the potential repair customer of 1,000 different things, display all certifications, and disclose that they are not an authorized service provider, only a lowly independent repair provider. And then there's a bunch of stuff about penalties if you don't do all this. I have to stop and ask, where do recyclers and refurbishers and the entire secondary repair market that doesn't have a retail location fit into this? We don't repair for people, remember. But then I guess we're effectively banned from right to repair benefits anyway, so never mind. Okay, so that's Oregon. But wait a minute. Isn't there something missing here? What about the parts pairing ban? What about the critical requirement in the template that the tool can't require use of the internet, which would mean parts pairing can't exist? No mention of that for Oregon. That's bad. That's very bad. What does that mean? It means if Oregon doesn't require a non-internet solution to pair parts, then Oregon parts pairing will happen over the internet or text. And that means Oregon does not ban parts pairing. It allows the centralized infrastructure to exist in Apple devices, the centralized control to exist in full. It means owners and repair providers have not been given the key to their locks. It actually makes sense if you think about it. If parts pairing was simply going away in Oregon, then there wouldn't be all this fuss about certification and requirements for independent repair providers. If parts pairing is gone, what exactly are they meeting requirements in order to do? To summarize, as far as I can tell, Oregon maintains parts pairing in full and simply forces Apple to pair some parts and possibly remove some alerts over the internet and under certain circumstances for owners and repair providers who agree to get certified to Apple's satisfaction and make disclosures and state that they aren't authorized. Where are the news articles about this? Where did the myriad of reporters get the impression that the Oregon bill actually bans parts pairing? Did they even read the bill? You might ask, well, why is it important that parts pairing as a whole be eliminated instead of just forcing Apple to pair some parts or remove some alerts when asked? Well, it's important because it's not okay that Apple or any manufacturer should have centralized control of the devices we own. It's a violation of our property rights that Apple should be able to prevent a current or future owner from doing what they want with their stuff. We shouldn't have to ask them to flip a switch. What if Apple or any manufacturer goes out of business or otherwise doesn't exist to wave its magic wand? Millions of devices could turn to bricks, potentially the biggest case of abandonware ever. It's not acceptable that we allow that possibility. In conclusion, I feel like I've learned some things reading the bills, but I also feel confused. Is this as convoluted as it seems, or am I losing my mind? There are obviously so many cooks in the kitchen that the resulting bills seem like word salad. Do any of these cooks actually understand the industry, or do repair for a living, or comprehend what parts pairing is to the extent of knowing whether a bill eliminates it or not? Maybe confusion is the actual intent, to throw word salad hand grenades all over the place, and eventually the opposition gives up? But I don't think Apple will give up. They're watching all this very closely. If the public and the media are not educated about what's actually happening in detail, well, you can bet Apple is. They're constructing new programs, new PR campaigns, like the recent announcement that they're thinking about allowing some used parts for super new devices at some point in the future. Hooray! That's not a concession. That's a strategic chess move which you can bet will nullify right to repair efforts. So, why do I care so much about all this? Why am I bothering to try to figure it all out? Yeah, I want to save my crumbling refurbishing industry that right to repair is all but disregarding, but it's mostly because the truth matters, and because so much of the narrative I see going on around me does not represent the truth. It's inappropriate for there to be a public media narrative of what's going on when, if you educate yourself technically and look at the bills, it's so plain to see that the narrative is miles off. I haven't even gotten into the other bills because that would make this a 3-hour video. The fact is, the California bill was terrible. All parts pairing language was removed as a concession to Apple, and Apple loved the bill so much that they said they would honor it nationwide. And hey, actually, why don't we make it a national right to repair bill? Yeah, they proposed that. And the industry, the media, do you think they said, oh crap, we did something wrong here and clearly this isn't good? Hell no. The industry and the media applauded so loudly that millions think the California bill was a success, that it somehow put Apple on its heels. But make no mistake, Apple makes no concession. It only makes very, very calculated chess moves. A national bill that gives Apple parts pairing could in fact happen. We could end up with a national right to repair bill that overrides all state efforts and kills the secondary market and all used parts nationwide, giving Apple a repair monopoly. If we don't educate ourselves and start telling the truth, then yeah, we could end up with a national right to repair bill that kills repair. It wouldn't be anywhere near the first activist campaign that ended up defeating its own purpose. Thanks for watching.